lesson is on Matteo Carcassi's study in A minor, Opus 60, number 7. This is a very famous and popular piece for classical guitar, one I thoroughly enjoyed when I first studied it. But oftentimes when we study a piece of music, depending on our experience, we only see so much of the piece. And so I'd like to share with you my observations and thoughts about this work. First off, this work has got technical challenges in it, not just tempo, but we have a little bit of tremolo. We have tremolo going into arpeggiated forms, and it's got like a little cadenza in the middle of it, and we've got a lot of drama in the music, lots of dynamics. Not all the dynamics are written out. There are dynamic markings, but within a phrase, there's changes that occur that are being implied by just simply the harmony. But today, I'd like to focus on some of the relationship in this piece to previous topics on Partimento. Partimento is some refers to a school of music that started in Italy, in particular Naples, in the 17th to 18th century. And in those days, boys and girls who were orphaned would live in a conservatory. And part of their training in some of the conservatories in Italy, and most notably in Naples, was music training. And the method of that music training became standard. There are some things unique about the manner in which they approached teaching music to children and developing their musicality, their sense of pitch through solfeggio, and the counterpoint through vocal training. They learned basically the rules of counterpoint. And this piece here, though oftentimes credited to the classical period, because if we look strictly at when Carcassi was composing music, we'd find that he was in the early 19th century when he was really making his mark. And this is important because this is also the beginning of what we would describe as the Romantic period. So he's on the edge, as most of the composers that we associate with the classical period. Giuliani, Sor, Carcassi, Carulli, these are all composers that were in the early 19th century. So why do we say counterpoint in this particular piece is that, number one, there are mostly two voices. Even when three voices are included, it's really the outer voices that are being emphasized. And the counterpoint is probably become a greater interest because of the interest in the music of Bach, which was being championed by composers such as Mendelssohn and Schumann. And so when we look at this piece, it's not going to sound like Bach, but there are some elements that he's bringing into this composition that's exploiting the two-voice counterpoint. And for those of you who've had music training, music theory training, you will remember all the rules, okay? So let's take a look first off at what melody we have and what chords we have. We're going to do like a little bit of an analysis of this piece. But I'll start with the melody in the first section. And it sounds like this. So in that melody, we had the beginning just one note. Now I didn't play the tremolo. That's a technical thing that Carcassi is inserting in this piece, and it's really effective in being able to lengthen the line. When we use tremolo typically on guitar, we are using it to create the illusion for an audience distance, maybe by 20, 30, 40 feet, of a note that's being sustained. So the rapid striking of the note allows for you to be able to crescendo and decrescendo on that note if you like. So the very first note, we just hear the note A. Yeah, maybe we crescendo on that note as we're doing the tremolo. And then you've got a scale that comes down. Play a melody just by itself and we remove the tremolo and the harmony, we notice we feel free to be able to picture how the melody might change in dynamics. And this is the interpretive element in playing a piece of music, is what are the tones saying to you? How are you feeling those tones? What do they seem to be saying in terms of inflex? And you're using your own language. If you're Italian, it'd be Italian. If you're English, it would be English. And so part of our interpretation of the piece is really, in my belief, is connected to our own spoken language. Okay, let's take a look at the bass line, which in the very first four notes, we had the melody on the top part repeating the same tone and then breaking free. But in the bass line, we had a melody that kind of outlined two chords, or at least implied that. We had an A, a C, that's a third, and then we went up to the note F. So there was a kind of a leap. And it comes all the way back down to A again. If I was going to compare the first two measures and I said, which is the most interesting melody, I'd say it was in the bass line, because of that, the way that bass line is a little bit irregular, and then it's going to go down by step. So in that first four bars, I think you can see why. I think the bass melody is more interesting because as that leap, then when it comes down from the scale, it moves up chromatically. And yeah. If we put these two together and we remove all the other parts, we would hear this. Now you hear two-voice counterpoint. And as you're listening to it, you may have noticed that there's some places in here where the top melody is not moving around, but eventually comes back down. And its repetition is really inserting the idea that the note's being sustained. So imagine those notes being sustained like on a violin. So if we were imagining these notes being sustained, it makes more sense. The bass line and the melody above are sometimes moving in contrasting movement. So we have two voice textures. We could have one voice staying at one place and the other notes moving against it. We call that oblique. We could have the notes moving in parallel, perhaps thirds, perhaps sixths, perhaps tenths. And we could have contrary motion. When one voice is moving up, the other voice is moving down. So in the very first part, if we're looking at this, we have oblique motion. And then we have parallel motion. And those were all tenths. And now we have oblique motion again. And now the B is going to go up to C, and the F is going to go down to E. that's going to be a contrary motion. And now the bass note. So what were the intervals that we had there at the very end? Well, we had a sixth to start, still a sixth, a fifth, tritone, and now it goes to a sixth, and to a fifth, and the chord we have right now harmonically that's being implied is an E chord. No G sharp in there, but it's being implied. When we add the third voice, that's when you'll hear the G sharp. The second time he does the same part, he makes some changes. Let's see what he does in the second phrase. He starts off the same. Now he gives us the arpeggios and the bass lines moving the same. And the chords we had there, harmonies, were D minor, so we got a fifth here and a 10th here. So our D minor chord, instead of looking like this, the F has been brought up an octave for vocal considerations. When you're trying to create a nice texture and you want a little bit more space so that you can hear the voices clearly, you may move voices around. The harmony may still be a D minor chord, but in this case, he's got a fifth and the lower two voices, and then he's got the first finger all the way up on the note F, which is the third of the chord, but the interval between the bass note and the bass note and the highest note is a 10th. So he went from this sound, and two voices moved, the top two voices, but the third voice did not move. And now it's going to move. The A is going to go to G sharp, and the E is going to go to D. The B, still in parallel motion, A minor. And now he's going to give us the note, the A is going to stay, and he's going to give us the note D and B, which is a 6. But the A in the middle sounds a bit dissonant because we're hearing the A and the B so close together, a second. And then the next chord, now we've got a D sharp in there, and that sounds like a B7th chord. And now we've got an E, A, and B. We've got like an A minor chord with a ninth in there. And then we got the F, and we got a tritone. And if we wanted to, we could probably make the case that this is a B half diminished. And then we go to the A minor chord. That sets it up, and it's a 6/4, which means that the bass note is the fifth of the chord. And that's a very cadential way to approach this. Suspension, as he's going to go to the E chord, and that brings us back to A minor. Same thing. This time he has a little different way of getting to the very ending. He wants a very dramatic ending on an A minor rather than an E. So he gives us the diminished, D sharp, B7th chord, goes right to the A minor chord in 6/4 cadential formula, and the E chord, and then it gives us an A minor chord, and he arpeggiates it. Those are probably the most melodic tones in sequence, very, very quickly at the end, all the way through at this point. We've been hearing melodies moving pretty much at quarter note pace. There's lots of 16 notes in the piece, but the actual rhythmic movement of the melody has been moving mostly by quarter notes. At the end, if we count the whole arpeggio as part of the melody, we have... Yeah. Now, this passage, a lot of guitars will just play it here. And I just didn't feel so satisfied with that open string, so I wanted... It just seemed too plain, the note F. I wanted could slide up, or it could be... Okay, that's just a personal preference in that one area. Okay, the dynamic markings at the very end is piano, which is a bit of a surprise on that last part because it's so exciting. Yeah, but most of the piece he just marked down forte, and he didn't really give us an idea of what to do with it. So he wants it to be strong. I think that's the most important part. But I do think that we need to actually sometimes drop dynamics, not play everything at the same dynamic level all the way through. I don't think that's what he implied. And he wanted a crescendo on measure 3. I think he already figured that we knew that we were supposed to decrescendo in measure 2. So then that brings us to crescendo. Second section, again, he's sticking with this 2-voice counterpoint. The top note, again, is a tremolo, but this time we feel like we're in the key of C because it gives us, makes it feel like we've moved from A minor to C major. And that's because he begins with a C and a C. But if you look at the entire measure, we count all the notes in that measure, and we compare them, we might find that, oh gosh, we have C and E, and C and C, C and E, A and C. We're not really having a full chord. So if we looked at the first 3 beats, we might infer that we actually had an A minor chord, because that would have been consistent with that in an inversion. Yeah. And then the next part, we have the melody going, instead of going down, it's going up. It's going up chromatically. And then down to F. Then it goes down chromatically. So very interesting opening B section, some chromaticism. So again, listen to the bass line. Unexpected surprises in there, yes? It doesn't sound as a solo melodic line, because at this point we're going to notice that the top part is going to be moving in contrary motion. So we've got, in the second measure of the B section, we've got an F and a D, then an E. So the F and the D is a 6th, goes to an octave, then it goes to a 10th, then he makes it a major, so a little F sharp, and that's going to bring us to an octave, another octave, and then he's going to go down chromatically, A and C, A and F sharp, that's a 6th, and then we're going to have B and F natural, that's a tritone, and then we're going to have C and E, which is a 3rd. Then we're going to have another octave, and then a 6th, and then a 10th. So what are we seeing in here? We're seeing good voice leading, and it's making the piece much more exciting because we're hearing 2 independent melodies. Again, in the Baroque period, we see lots of counterpoint. In the classical period, we do see counterpoint, especially in Mozart and Beethoven and Haydn. We see that counterpoint observed, but not continuously like we would see in the Baroque period. We had more homophonic textures and then mixed with some counterpoint. In the 19th century, counterpoint makes a bit of a comeback, and so we're seeing much more of it. And in this piece, it really is a study in counterpoint on guitar. creating two independent melodies. And that's why I think I found it so attractive as well. So let me play the first 4 bars of the B section. So we've got octave, 6th, 3rd, 4th, 6th, octave, 10th, major 10th, octave, octave, 6th, and tritone, 10th, octave, 6th, 10th, and then he's going to continue from that. This study in A minor by Carcassi is a challenging piece on a number of levels, particularly for the right hand. We have tremolo in various portions of the piece, and the chief difficulty is that the tremolo is not on string 1, it's on string 3 and on string 2. So execution for the right hand to be able to do that effectively and cleanly and quickly and evenly is much more of a challenge.